Here is a thought that should genuinely unsettle your comfortable modern existence. Right now, somewhere in the oceans, the swamps, the rivers, and the forests of this planet, there are animals alive today that were alive when the dinosaurs were alive, not the descendants of those animals, not distant cousins that share a common ancestor. The actual animals or forms so structurally unchanged from their ancient predecessors that calling them prehistoric is not hyperbole, but biological description. The mass extinction event 66 million years ago that ended the Mesozoic era and eliminated approximately 3/4 of all species on Earth. The one that wiped out every non-avian dinosaur, most marine reptiles, most large terrestrial animals, did not get everything. Some lineages threaded through it. Some found ecological pockets deep enough or stable enough or cold enough that the world ending on the surface did not end them. And then they just kept going. Through the Paleocene, the Eocene, the Oligocene, the Miocene, the Pliocene, the Pleistocene, and into the present day, essentially unchanged while everything around them transformed beyond recognition. These are the living fossils, and they are considerably more strange, more numerous, and more philosophically confronting than most people realize. The horseshoe crab is the most commonly cited example, and it earns its place at the front of this list because the numbers involved are simply remarkable. Horseshoe crabs, 4 species in the family Lemuridae, found on the Atlantic coast of North America and various coastlines of Southeast Asia, have remained morphologically similar to their ancestors for approximately 450 million years. 450 million years. For context, that is before the first forests existed on land. That is before the first vertebrates walked on shore. That is deeper than the Permian extinction, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, the end Cretaceous extinction, and every other mass death event in the intervening half-billion years. The horseshoe crab was ancient when the dinosaurs were born, watched the dinosaurs go extinct, and is currently being harvested for its blood by the pharmaceutical industry, which needs it to test drugs for bacterial contamination because horseshoe crab blood clots immediately in the presence of endotoxins in a way nothing else does. The horseshoe crab's blood is blue. Not as a metaphor, literally blue, because it uses copper-based hemocyanin rather than iron-based hemoglobin as its oxygen transport molecule. The clotting agent extracted from this blue blood, called Limulus amebocyte lysate, or LAL, is used to test every injectable drug, vaccine, and medical implant sold in the United States for bacterial contamination. The animal that has been unchanged since before trees existed is currently protecting millions of people from contaminated medical products every year. It is also, despite the name, not a crab. It is more closely related to spiders and scorpions than to true crabs, which is a fact that has no practical consequence whatsoever, but will absolutely ruin horseshoe crabs for anyone who has arachnophobia and previously found them charming. The Nautilus is in many ways the horseshoe crab's ocean-dwelling counterpart in the living fossil category, carrying an external coiled shell through ocean depths with a serene indifference to the passage of geological time. Nautiluses are cephalopods, the same group that includes octopuses and squid. But while their relatives have been innovating wildly for hundreds of millions of years, developing sophisticated nervous systems, color-changing skin, and behavioral complexity that rivals vertebrates, the Nautilus has been doing essentially the same thing since the Devonian period, roughly 490 million years ago. The Nautilus shell is a marvel of natural engineering, divided into chambers that the animal fills with gas to achieve neutral buoyancy at various depths. The animal itself occupies only the outermost chamber, sealing off the inner chambers behind it as it grows. The spiral of the Nautilus shell follows a logarithmic spiral that appears in contexts ranging from galaxy arms to flower seed arrangements to human cochlea, a geometric form so efficient that evolution arrived at it once in a cephalopod, and the math keeps reappearing everywhere else independently. Modern nautiluses have changed, little from their Triassic ancestors. They have relatively simple eyes compared to their cephalopod relatives. Pinhole eyes with no lens, essentially a pinhole camera system that provides some image-forming capability without the sophisticated optics of an octopus or squid. This simplicity is not a failure of development, but a stable solution that has been adequate for the Nautilus's ecological role across nearly 500 million years. The Nautilus is nocturnal, descends to considerable depths during the day, and ascends to shallower water at night to feed, a behavioral pattern that has kept it out of reach of most predators long enough to become one of the great survival success stories of animal life. The coelacanth is possibly the most dramatic individual discovery in the living fossil category because it was believed to be extinct for decades, based on the best available evidence. And then it was found alive. Coelacanths were known from fossil records extending back roughly 400 million years. The last fossil coelacanths dated to approximately 66 million years ago, the end Cretaceous extinction boundary. Scientists concluded reasonably that coelacanths had gone extinct at that boundary along with the dinosaurs. They were studied as an interesting extinct lineage, important for understanding the evolutionary transition from fish to tetrapods because of their unique lobed fins. Then, in 1938, a museum curator named Marjorie Courtenay Latimer noticed an unusual fish among a batch delivered by a South African trawler and recognized it as unlike anything in modern ichthyology. The fish was eventually identified as a living coelacanth, a species of an order believed extinct for 66 million years, discovered alive off the coast of South Africa. The discovery was described as equivalent to finding a living dinosaur. It was not quite that. Coelacanths, while ancient, are fish rather than large terrestrial vertebrates. But the conceptual impact was comparable. An entire lineage believed extinct for 66 million years was simply there, in the Indian Ocean, going about its business. The coelacanth's lobed fins move in an alternating pattern, front left with back right with back left, that is homologous to the limb movement pattern of walking tetrapods. Watching a coelacanth move its fins is watching the locomotor pattern that your own legs inherited from an ancient ancestor, implemented in fish anatomy in deep ocean water. The coelacanth does not know it is doing something historically significant. It is hunting squid in the dark at 200 meters depth, the same way its ancestors were doing while dinosaurs were alive. There are two living species, the West Indian Ocean coelacanth and the Indonesian coelacanth, the latter discovered only in 1998. Both are deep water species, which explains why they evaded detection for so long and how they survived the pressures that eliminated so many other large animals. Depth is a refuge. The deep ocean is conservative in its environmental conditions and has remained relatively stable across geological upheavals that transformed shallow and terrestrial environments. The Ginkgo biloba tree is the most venerable living fossil in the plant kingdom, representing a lineage that dates to approximately 270 million years ago, before the dinosaurs in the Permian period. Ginkgo is the sole surviving species of the division Ginkgophyta, which once included multiple genera distributed globally. Every other ginkgo relative is now extinct. The single surviving species was preserved in cultivation in Chinese temple gardens for centuries, essentially saved from wild extinction by human horticultural practice, and has since been spread globally as an ornamental street tree. Ginkgo leaves are immediately recognizable. The distinctive bilobed fan shape appears in fossils indistinguishable from leaves, on trees currently growing in parks and on sidewalks in cities worldwide. The leaf shape has not changed meaningfully in 270 million years. When you walk past a ginkgo tree, you are walking past something that Triassic animals browsed, something that existed continuously through the extinction of the dinosaurs, something that watched the entire span of mammalian evolution from a spectating position. The ginkgo's survival attributes include extraordinary stress tolerance. Ginkgo trees survived the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, with trees near the blast site recovering and continuing to grow when virtually everything else in the area was killed. They are resistant to disease, insects, fungi, and air pollution in ways that make them useful urban plantings. The chemical compounds responsible for some of this resilience have been extensively studied and have produced commercial supplements, though the evidence for specific cognitive benefits claimed for ginkgo extract is more mixed than supplement marketing suggests. The Tuatara of New Zealand is the only surviving member of the order Rhynchocephalia, a reptile lineage that was globally distributed and species-rich during the Mesozoic. The Rhynchocephalia were diverse and successful contemporaries of the early dinosaurs, occupying ecological roles across multiple continents. By the way, If you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. They declined and disappeared everywhere as the dinosaurs radiated and diversified. Except in New Zealand, where isolation preserved the last lineage. The Tuatara looks like a lizard, but is not a lizard. It is the last representative of a sister order to the lizards and snakes, a lineage that separated before the lizards began their own radiation. The differences are visible in anatomy. The Tuatara has a unique tooth structure unlike any other reptile, photoreceptor cells, in a third eye on top of its head that is most sensitive to light early in development and becomes covered with scales in adults, and a biology so attuned to cool temperatures that it remains active at lower temperatures than almost any other reptile. Tuataras grow extremely slowly and live very long lives. Individuals in captivity have exceeded 100 years and show no obvious signs of age-related decline. They reach sexual maturity at 10 to 20 years and continue reproducing into their 50s and beyond. The slow pace of life that characterizes the Tuatara's biology may be part of what allowed the lineage to persist in New Zealand's temperate, cool environment while its relatives elsewhere disappeared. The introduction of rats and other invasive mammals to New Zealand nearly eliminated Tuataras from the main islands, reducing them to a handful of small offshore islands free of introduced predators. Conservation programs have since relocated Tuataras to predator-free mainland sanctuaries and reintroduced them to their former range with considerable success. The last rhynchocephalian is currently being actively managed toward recovery, which is either a conservation success story or proof that humans spend a lot of effort cleaning up messes they made, depending on perspective. The shark lineage presents a different kind of living fossil case, not a single species unchanged, but a body plan and basic biology that has remained functional across a vast span of geological time. Sharks have existed since approximately 450 million years ago, with the earliest recognizable sharks appearing in the Devonian period. The modern shark bioplan, the streamlined body, the cartilaginous skeleton, the multiple rows of continuously replaced teeth, the electroreceptive ampullae of Lorenzini, had taken shape by the late Devonian, and has remained remarkably consistent across subsequent geological periods. Individual shark species change over geological time in the normal evolutionary pattern, but the fundamental shark design has proven so effective in marine predatory ecology that major departures from it have not been selected for across nearly 500 million years of ocean life. The shark is not unchanged the way a horseshoe crab is unchanged. Individual species evolve, go extinct, are replaced. But the lineage represents one of the most sustained examples of biological design stability in animal life. The frilled shark deserves specific mention within the shark lineage because it is, by any metric, the most obviously prehistoric-looking living shark. Chlamydosalacus anguineus inhabits deep waters globally and retains anatomical features characteristic of ancient shark lineages. A body shape more eel-like than the classic shark silhouette, a terminal mouth at the front of the head rather than on the underside, and gill structures with frilled edges not seen in modern shark families. When brought to the surface, frilled sharks look like something that should be labeled artist's reconstruction rather than live specimen photographed today. The Nautilus was mentioned earlier, but its fellow ancient cephalopod lineage deserves acknowledgement. The entire cephalopod group, nautiluses, octopuses, squid, cuttlefish, descended from shelled ancestors 480 million years ago, making them one of the oldest animal lineages with living representatives. While most cephalopods have evolved dramatically, The Nautilus's retention of its external shell places it closest morphologically to the ancestral cephalopod form, making it a genuine window into Cambrian-era ocean ecology. The horseshoe shrimp, Triops species, hold a specific record within the living fossil category. They are considered the oldest living animal species in terms of morphological stasis. Triops cancriformis, the tadpole shrimp of European temporary pools, has been assigned to fossils dating approximately 220 million years ago, the Triassic period, that are essentially indistinguishable from the living species. 220 million years of species-level morphological continuity is a record difficult to contextualize except to note that 220 million years ago, mammals had barely appeared. The Atlantic Ocean did not exist, and the continents were still in the early stages of separating from Pangaea. Triops live in temporary pools, bodies of water that appear seasonally or after rains, and dry out completely. Their survival strategy involves producing eggs that can remain viable in dried sediment for decades or possibly centuries, hatching only when conditions are right. The same pool in a European field might produce triops whose ancestors hatched in the same location for geological timescales. The dormant eggs are the key to survival. When conditions are unstable, the ability to pause development and wait is more valuable than any physical adaptation. The lamprey is an ancient vertebrate lineage that diverged from the main vertebrate tree before jaws evolved, approximately 500 million years ago. Lampreys are jawless fish with circular toothed mouths used for parasitic attachment to other fish, from which they rasp flesh and consume blood. They are not aesthetically appealing to most human observers, which is understandable because the mouth configuration is directly from whatever evolutionary designer would have emerged if someone had asked for a parasitic circular saw. But the lamprey lineage is biologically extraordinary as a window into ancient vertebrate anatomy. Lampreys have a nervous system whose organization has been studied extensively because its relative simplicity compared to jawed vertebrates makes it useful for understanding vertebrate nervous system organization in general. Lamprey research has contributed to neuroscience understanding of locomotion control, sensory processing, and neural circuit organization. Fossil lampreys from 360 million years ago are essentially indistinguishable from modern lampreys. The basic design, the circular suction mouth, the eel-like body, the 7 gill openings on each side, has persisted across the end Devonian, end Permian, end Triassic, and end Cretaceous extinctions without being significantly altered. The lamprey has looked at every major extinction event in the last 360 million years, and continued doing exactly what it was already doing. The platypus of Australia and the echidna, collectively the monotrims, represent the most ancient surviving lineage of mammals, having diverged from the Therian mammals, the placental and marsupial lineages, approximately 160 million years ago. The platypus specifically retains features characteristic of early mammals and even pre-mammalian ancestry. It lays eggs, it lacks a true stomach, having a simplified esophagus to intestine pathway instead, and it uses electroreception to detect prey underwater, the only mammal to use electric field detection in hunting. The platypus electroreceptors are located in the bill and are analogous in function to the ampullae of Lorenzini in sharks. An independent evolutionary solution to the same problem of detecting bioelectric fields from prey. The platypus closes its eyes, ears, and nostrils during underwater hunting and navigates and hunts entirely by electroreception, a mammal using the same hunting strategy as ancient sharks in Australian rivers in the 21st century. The platypus genome analysis has revealed extraordinary biological complexity, a genome that contains elements characteristic of reptiles, birds, and mammals simultaneously, reflecting the platypus's position as a branch off the early mammalian tree before the mammalian lineage fully committed to its distinctive reproductive and physiological strategy. The platypus has 10 sex chromosomes rather than 2. A feature that looks like it belongs in a different kingdom entirely. The Volemi pine, discovered in a remote canyon in Australia in 1994, is the plant equivalent of the Coelacanth discovery. Known previously only from fossils dating to approximately 200 million years ago, the Wollemi pine was believed extinct until a small stand of approximately 100 trees was found in a remote Blue Mountains canyon by a bushwalker who happened into terrain rarely visited by humans. The tree is now propagated extensively in cultivation, with the wild population kept secret to prevent disturbance. The Wollemi pine has waxy, bubble-like bark texture unlike any other living tree, a growth pattern where multiple trunks can emerge from a single root system, and a genetic uniformity within the wild population suggesting a severe historical bottleneck. All individuals may descend from very few ancestral trees, making the cultivation program's genetic diversity efforts critical for the species' long-term viability. The nautiloid, the horseshoe crab, the coelacanth, the tuatara, the ginkgo, the lamprey, the platypus. Each is in its own way a message from deep geological time, persisting through conditions that ended most of what existed alongside them, demonstrating that survival does not always require transformation. Some designs are stable enough to outlast the destruction of the world around them, finding refuge in deep water, in isolated islands, in ecological roles stable enough that radical change provides no advantage over the already adequate original. The world is full of prehistory walking around in the present. The horseshoe crab on the beach collecting blood for medical testing was ancient when the first vertebrate stepped onto land. The Nautilus drifting through deep water was already old when the first flower opened. The Tuatara watching from its rocky New Zealand perch outlasted every relative it ever had. They are here, right now, today. Which raises an interesting question about which of the things we consider modern will still be here in 200 million years, being cautiously studied by whatever comes after us. Probably not the things we're proudest of. Probably something that found a dark, cold, stable place and just kept going.